Today's podcast is brought to you by Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. If your property gets damaged by a storm, it's nice to know there's a Kentucky Farm Bureau insurance agent in your hometown who's committed to making things right. Rain or shine, you can count on the great coverage and personal service you expect from Kentucky's insurance company. To request a free quote, find your local KFB insurance agent at mykfbagent.com. Kentucky Farm Bureau, big on commitment. Welcome to Kentucky Farm Bureau News, the podcast. I'm Tim Thornberry, editor of the Kentucky Farm Bureau News magazine. Our guest today is Joe Bonomo, who is a fine artist living here in Kentucky. Joe has done a couple of covers for the KFB News magazine and is widely known for his beautiful artwork in the equine industry. Joe, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Certainly so glad to have you here. For our readers out there and our folks that listen to the podcast, Joe is a wonderful artist, and he has graced us with a couple of covers. One you haven't seen yet, but you will, so that's all I'll say about it. The other, we did our May issue. He's just been so gracious to us, and we're so very glad to have you here today.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I love Kentucky. I'm kind of a new person to the state, but there's many things to rave about in Kentucky, especially the bluegrass region where I live.
Joe, if you don't mind to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Who is Joe, and how did you get here, and just anything that you want to share with us?
Well, you know, I'm often asked about art when people see my work, and I would basically say it's a God-given talent that I ended up with, that I was always the kid in the back of the classroom that would be doodling in the margins of the book, and at a very young age it was easy to identify myself as having an artistic talent. And over the years, decades, lifetime, you refine certain things about what you like to do and build the skills needed to perfect what's going on in your art. So I started off at a very young age, and growing up in a big city on the East Coast, and my father gave me great advice. He goes, you know, we really support your art. It's great. It's wonderful. I think it's something that you should pursue. But if you really want to make a living, you need to work in a field that is going to be more consistent. And that kind of pushed me in. My first field was an electrician, of all things. And I did very well with that, and it kind of supported me. It put me in a place that I was able to start a family and pay the bills and get through all of that. But art has always been in the background for me. It's always been there.
That is cool. By the way, Joe, I need some electrical work done. If you still got your license. No, I'm just kidding.
Right now, I'm relegated to screwing in light bulbs, and that's as far as my trade goes.
You know, I got, if I can interject this, I got the same advice from my mom years ago. She said, put the camera down and go get a real job at Toyota.
Well, isn't it wonderful that people are giving gifts? And I'm a deeply religious man, and I know that God has given me gifts for a reason, and that number one reason is to use it. You know, I could start quoting scripture, but basically what it comes down to is if I'm given a talent like art, I'm accountable for that, and it's all to share God's grace and glory with the rest of the world in all its forms. It isn't just sitting in the pulpit and talking. It's showing people. And it doesn't necessarily mean a religious theme painting. I think when people look at my art across the board, they see enthusiasm and kind of a connection with the human existence. I do a lot of people. I paint a lot of portraits. That's always been a strong part of what I do. And in portraying them, I think they get a chance to see what other people see in them. The plight of American culture nowadays is people are pessimistic. They don't see the good in things generally. They're always looking or wanting the breaking news that's going to
Exactly.
devastate us. And I find this in Kentucky mostly, that people are good, basic, wanting to experience the good things in life. And I hope that my art, in whether it was the last painting that I did for Farm Bureau here or the next one, they see things that make them feel good about where they're at, what they're doing, and why they are. And that's what my focus is.
Absolutely. And I can attest to the fact that that's exactly what your art does. I've seen a lot of it. You do, you're a regular at Keeneland,
Yes.
During their events, and just a lot of beautiful equine related paintings that you do. Talk to me a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you. I always was a portrait artist, so moving to Kentucky, I was thinking I'm going to need to paint more equine sporting events, and to be quite honest, I was fearful of it. Not being in the equine industry per se. There's a lot of people out there that paint horses very well. And my fear was that, okay, I know there's 4 legs, a head, and a long neck. I was afraid my horses were going to look more like big dogs and not having the anatomy or the knowledge of equine anatomy to make it look legitimate. That wasn't the case. I kind of fell into it because my training as an artist helped me to paint what I'm seeing well. So it doesn't matter if it's a apple or a landscape or a still life or a person, they're all the same. It is bringing in that information and then interpreting it. So getting back to what I think is the best place on the face of the planet in Lexington, I really speak very highly of Keeneland. Keeneland has always welcomed artists there. It's a great place to experience the better side of nature rather than the other sides. And what I've done at Keeneland is you'll find a lot of equine artists and photographers. They're fixated with who won the race. They photograph at the finish line or at the winner's circle. And that's not where my art is based around. I don't think you'll ever find a finish line or a winner's circle photograph from me or painting. I go for the back stretches, the barn area, the people that work in the industry. I try to just mill about, make myself unseen, and catch those photographs when they don't necessarily look for me. And I get their sense about what they're doing as they're doing it, which is a story unto itself. You could freeze frame a video and get somebody in that introspect look on their face. And the one thing that I enjoy about Keeneland is that most of the time that introspect is a moment of joy where they're actually doing or involved in something that they really love doing. And that's so easy to paint. That kind of emotion, easy. It almost paints itself. It gives me enjoyment to stand in front of the easel and capture that. It's when the emotions are in too deep to handle that the painting becomes labored. The image becomes something that doesn't resound with other people. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody understands happiness. And so that's why I focus in that direction.
You know, I've often heard, and I think it's true, whether it's a photographer or a painter, that great photographers and great painters see things a little differently than what somebody else might. Maybe it's the lighting, maybe it's an angle, maybe it's all of that put together. But do you find that to be true? I find it to be true when I have my camera with me. A lot of times I'll see things that maybe, if I'm lucky, that somebody else is not seeing, and I'm able to project that in a photograph. How does that work with your painting?
I work basically, now as a younger person, younger artist, I would always train myself to paint from life. Mm-hmm. So there'd be somebody there and I'd capture an essence of what I'm looking for, maybe refine it more in the studio. But as I get older, especially in equine sports, I primarily work off of photographs. You just can't have a horse stand still long enough to get everything that you need to get down on that. So photographs have helped me quite a bit. And by doing that, it has made me a better photographer. So as far as what I see, when I first learned to paint, my instructor, who is a nobody, although if you saw his work, you wouldn't believe that he is an unknown artist, but he was a great teacher. And I went to him specifically to learn how to paint. It took a year, if not longer, before he would even allow me to put a paintbrush in my hand. And the reason for that is that he was more into teaching me how to see rather than paint. By teaching me how to see, I could sculpt, I could draw, I could mold, I could paint, I could use pastel. It's just interchangeable as long as my eye is in tune with what information is coming at me. So seeing is the most important thing in my business. Secondly would be a knowledge of the tools and what the tools will do for me. What are the limitations of different mediums and stuff like that. But then the other thing that comes, I guess, from my religious side, my spiritual side, is a joy of seeing what is unique about people, what makes everything individual, and the emotional content. Now, sometimes I inject an emotional content through color. Color evokes emotion very quickly. But if you don't have the basics down, that is form and function, no matter how much color you throw at it, it's not going to work. You have to be a good compensational artist or photographer. You have to know what you're looking at and how it works and why it doesn't work. Because oftentimes knowing why it doesn't work is as good as knowing why it does work. So I think seeing is the most important thing in art and photography. It's not necessarily getting the Pulitzer Prize for a photograph or another award for recognition in your medium, whatever it is. It's being able to see.
And being happy with what you see.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some other work of yours. In addition to the equine, you've done some very historic type paintings.
Yes.
And they're just as beautiful to me. That you really, the ones that I've seen you capture maybe a time gone by that other people maybe don't know about or haven't seen a lot of. Mm-hmm. And tell me about that. How did you get involved with that side of painting?
Well, as an artist, you're always looking for new forms of inspiration, subject matter that really sparks your interest. And I've started off in sort of a Victorian mode, per se, for lack of a better way of saying it, just because of its depth, its texture, its color of all things. Now, you and I think of Victorian as oftentimes black and white, shades of gray, and that wasn't necessarily what was going on back then. There was a lot of color that was going on. So as I was getting bored with the Victorian model, somebody came up to me and says, well, I know you're looking for some new things that spark your interest. Have you ever thought of steampunk? And I couldn't tell you what steampunk was to save my life, but it's an alternate historical account of those things that I liked about the Victorian style, but put it in a different mode of electricity wasn't discovered per se, and the culture of people still were in the steam engine kind of mode. So I brought that into my art quite a bit, and I've done shows at galleries that were nothing but steampunk. One that stands out in my mind was one show that I did in San Diego where I took every character from the Sgt. Pepper album. So Jimmy Spears, Sgt. Pepper, Lovely Rita Meet a Maid, and all those other characters that are mentioned on the album, and I painted them in steampunk fashion. So that was a way of me gaining interest, if for no other reason but to feed my own interest in painting, keeping it fresh, keeping it lively. And so that's just one thing that I've done over the years to keep the creative juices flowing, per se.
Joe, we introduced your work to our Farm Bureau audience last May. And for those who will be listening to this later down the road, that's May of 2024, when you did a painting called the Patriot. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of a special, it went with the story we did, but it was our Memorial Day kind of thing. And we got so much attention from that. I think to date on social media, it's probably one of the most viewed links that we've put out there. And it was colorful. It was just a beautiful painting, and it really jumped off the page. What was your mindset when you were doing that?
Well, there were other people that came to me and wanted a historic piece, something that was very patriotic. And by nature, I am very patriotic also. And so this was a military organization. And, sometimes when you start dissecting what organizations do and who they address, when you say military, I mean, it could be everything from Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, male, female, all the different races. As you know, in our culture, everybody is kind of compensated with make sure that everybody's accounted for in all their general terms. So I was really trying to condense that. And what would be an image that I would be able to put together that kind of addressed all the branches of the military? And by thinking about that, I kind of pushed the hands of time back to where we were at the birth of our nation, and the farmer patriot in the field would be our first line of defense, and oftentimes the only line of defense, but that's where all the military branches sprang from. So that got me into thinking, okay, a Revolutionary War patriot might be the way I want to go. I posed the question to the people that I was talking to regarding that image, and they saw the simplicity of it, how it really involved everything that was going on. And so the only thing left was to find somebody who could portray that. And I did find a gentleman in Winchester that's his field. He takes care of the Daniel Boone historical accounts. He portrays Daniel Boone. He has a business that revolves around that. He had all the materials, and he was quite willing to help out. And without knowing me, it was kind of a miracle that he said, well, you know what, I feel comfortable with your ability to render a good portrait of myself that, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we met at a park one day. He posed. I took the photographs. It was actually none of my photographs that I painted from. My wife was standing off to the side with her cell phone and took photographs, and good is good. I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and say that my photographs are any better than a cell phone photograph, but she captured what I was looking for: the look, the internal things that were going on in the model's head at the time, and it was perfect. All I had to do was render it after that, and certainly, I enjoy putting the American flag in my paintings whenever I can. And some people would say, well, you painted this guy from 1776, but it's a modern day flag. And I did so with purpose. And in explanation, it was a way of me joining the two ends of this cord together, that patriotism didn't end in 1776. It's something that we live today, every day, all the time, if we're lucky. The day that we can't do that is going to be a sad day.
I agree 100%, and it was so well received by our readers and folks online. So we appreciate that. Of course, in true fashion for me, I had never put other work on the cover of the magazine other than a photograph that I had taken. I know that's a little egotistical, a little bit. But after this, it really got us to thinking about doing things a little bit differently, looking in different ways. And of course, Joe, I had to take advantage of you, because if you did it once, maybe you'd do it again. And so that's led us to the Christmas issue that will be coming up. I won't say a whole lot about it, but you and I got together, and you were gracious enough to lend your artwork once again to the cover of our magazine. And I know this is going to be an even bigger hit out there. So we appreciate that. And I will say this: often it's the wife who comes up with maybe the better picture or something. I'll share a story with you. My dad was a photographer, and he would often set up a photo, but it was my mom who snapped the picture. And he didn't say that out loud a lot, but she said, I was really the one that took that. She always let me know that. So that's
well, there I am standing with this guy dressed in impeccable garb of a Revolutionary soldier, and I have lots of equipment, very expensive stuff, and there my wife is standing off on the side with her phone and wins the gold medal for the perfect photograph to work from, and I do appreciate that.
She's obviously watched you and learned well, or maybe you're learning from her. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this. Oftentimes I come in contact with people that they see my work, they're impressed by it, and one of the first things that they say is, I couldn't draw a stick person. And I truly believe this, is that God gives everyone a talent to use. You may not have found it, and it may not even be in art. It might be music. It might be the way you speak, the way you are able to motivate other people. Whatever it is, everyone does have that talent. And with my wife there, oftentimes I get together with other artists, and she enters into the conversation. Now, I would say that my wife can talk art with the best of them. Just from being around artists, she knows what she's looking at. When I do a painting, I don't call anybody else but my wife to take a look at it and comment on it. She gives me the best advice ever, because she knows my reference, she knows what I'm trying to do, and I trust her in giving me her opinion. As much as I would say, oh, no, that's not right, you can't argue with the truth. And she'll nail the one thing that holds my painting up or doesn't work well with it, and it's as plain as day when she mentions it, then I quickly usher her out of my studio. I correct the things, and then I call her back in for a second round of it. But I trust my wife implicitly with her idea of where I'm going with art.
That is so good to hear. So great of a story. Joe, I'm sure people come to you and go, I want to do what you do. I want to be able to do this. Do you have any advice for people, especially if they're younger folks, that maybe they have a talent and they're not sure which way to point that yet? What would you say to them?
Well, this just happened the other day. Somebody came to my home. It was a young man of 18. He was finishing up in high school and was kind of looking for direction within the art world. One of those was animation. Another one was kind of a modern take of art. Art has now broadened its base so much. You can not say that you're just a fine artist, but you're a fine artist in what form and in what medium. He was looking for some direction. And I think the best thing that I tell everyone is that philosophically, there's a book out there that I love. For artists, there's not one illustration or picture in the book, but it talks about that very thing with art. What makes art good? What makes it bad? How to approach art. It was written in 1917.
Wow.
Yeah, by a guy named Robert Henry, and it's called The Art Spirit. You could pick it up for $12 on Amazon or eBay, and I consider that the number one best written book about art, not only fine art, but photography and any other form of art. It's so broad-based. But what I would say in the way I was trained, much like that one gentleman that wouldn't let me hold a paintbrush after trying to learn painting from him, is that draw. Drawing has its application much deeper than you would imagine. It's not how well you render, but what you're rendering and why you're rendering. You're training your eye to see when you draw. You're not distracting it with any color. You're just looking at the lights, the darks, the shadows, the edges, the lost edges, all those things that make great art great. You're building those tools up. So the one thing that I would recommend for young artists or old artists, if you're 50 and you decided to go into art, this is the same thing I would tell you, is draw, draw, draw. Just keep drawing, and it will not return a void in your life as far as art goes.
Joe, I was thinking as we're sitting here talking, so often when I take my camera out, I know where I'm going to go and a subject that I'm going to take photos of. And what I have in my mind beforehand and what I end up usually afterwards, so often they're very different. And the environment that I'm in, the light that I have, the people I'm talking to, sometimes they're spot on and that works well, but other times it's way off and I end up with something else. I'd like to think better, at least equally as well or better. Does that ever happen to you? Do you start at one point and end up somewhere completely different?
We call those wonderful surprises, right? Yeah. I trained with a woman in Montana at one time, and she would relate to this as you're painting on the canvas, be willing to let go a little bit. Don't be so manufactured that everything has to be accounted for by your pre-notion of what the end is going to be. Be willing to be surprised yourself and go, oh my gosh, that's a nice little thing there that I was able to bump into. But also be willing to paint right over that also. So one thing that I've seen over the years of either teaching myself or learning myself is that Somebody will be doing something, they notice something very keen about a painting that they're doing, and almost stifled, they'll paint all around it and keep that one thing there because they considered it a gem, and it ends up inhibiting the whole painting. So in the freedom of art, be willing to destroy your art in front of you with a broad, very verbose stroke that might be better than the one that you're trying to protect. It's all a part of that. One thing now, this is where art theory separates in a lot of ways from what artist. I try not to be hyper-realistic in my work. I like abstraction. I like impressionism because what it does to the viewer, not necessarily my hand, but the viewer. The more abstract, the more impressionistic I go, it allows the viewer to interpret what I'm doing. So if you take a look at The Patriot, people go, boy, that looks really like a photo. And I go, really, look at it. It's lost edges. It's the impression of detail without painting the detail. The last thing you want to do is account for every hair on the eyelid that somebody has. You want to give the impression of that person, or the way the hair is on the face, or the way their eye is looking off on one side. That doesn't mean you paint the iris, the eyeball, the color of the eye, and everything that goes with it. As a matter of fact, the more you paint detail, the less interesting it is for the viewer to look at, because their brain is bored. Everything that needed to be said is said. The viewer is unimportant. With my art, I want the viewer to have as much into that painting as I did in painting it. And that's what I look forward to.
Well, everything that I've seen, you are spot on, my friend. It all looks so good. Now, I know by the time this goes out, Keeneland will have happened.
Yes.
So that's coming up. Do you get real excited when the fall or the spring gets here and you know you're going to go to a place and you know you're looking for that certain thing, or just looking for a lot of different subjects? Is it still exciting for you?
Oh my gosh, yes. Keeneland is what you would call a target-rich environment as far as all the pomp and circumstance, the way people dress. People still wear dresses there. Men wear ties and a hat and a jacket. It is, for an artist, a very target-rich environment. The horses are wonderful. There's plenty of excitement. And by far, I'm going to say this in all honesty, and that is the people that work at Keeneland are special people. They work around animals, and that in itself is difficult. But when you put a lot of people in that environment, there's a safety issue that is involved. And these people are committed to trying to keep everyone enjoying what they're doing, but be safe at the same time. And you'll meet some of the best people out there, the gate people, the ones that do the starting gate, the outriders, the person with a shovel picking things up. I've drawn them all, and I just love sitting and talking with them. There's some people that the people that are in the background, for the most part, you sit down and talk with them and you go, my gosh, you just wowed me with what you had to say. And I think it is because I was listening at the time to get to know them. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Keeneland is the place for me to feed my artistic voice.
You know, I sort of get that feeling a lot when I'm out on farms. Some of the greatest people I've ever known and ever meet are farm families that are out there. And man, they work so hard and they do so much. And it's exciting for me to know that I'm going to travel today and I'm going to go to a place that maybe I've never been before and meet some new people and try to capture what they do. So often it's led me to other stories, other photos, other places. And it's been a real treat. I'll invite you now, maybe in the future.
Certainly.
When I've got a big farm visit coming up, I'd love to take you out with me and let you see what I'm seeing sometimes.
That would be fantastic. I would enjoy that. Yes.
Joe, so good to have you here. So thankful and blessed to have your work to grace our magazine. And we can't thank you enough for that. And you know me, I'll probably ask for more later. Who knows?
You can count on me, Tim.
But you've been good to Farm Bureau and good to us, and we just really appreciate you being here today on the podcast.
I think Farm Bureau does a fantastic job. Certainly, their reach is broad and expansive, and I do appreciate the opportunity to do my little share for the cover of the magazine. I do.
Great. Well, you heard it, folks. Maybe in the future we can expect to see some more of this great artwork. But for now, we hope that you will enjoy our special Christmas edition coming up. You will not be disappointed, I promise. I think we're going to call it a collector's edition.
Oh, very nice. Yes.
Thanks again, Joe, for being here. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, Tim. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Joe, for being here on Kentucky Farm Bureau News, the podcast. If you like to listen to this and other Kentucky Farm Life podcasts, log on to your favorite podcasting platform.